Welcome to English Practice Stories.
Daddy, I lost a tooth. He lisped a bit as he said it, and as I held my hand out, I saw that his hand had a tooth in it. It was one of the front ones, and I congratulated him on losing it so cleanly. I wondered if he had pulled it out himself, but I put that out of my mind. Brandon didn't even pull his own splinters out, and I really couldn't see him yanking out his own teeth. He was 6 and 1 month old, as he liked to say, and this was the first tooth he had lost. He was late in that respect. Many of his friends had already started losing baby teeth, but he was giddy as he brought this one to me. "Now the tooth fairy will come and take it away," he said, skipping off to continue playing. Yes, I had forgotten that part. Brandon had become obsessed with the tooth fairy after his friend Nina lost her tooth. He thought of her as the blue fairy from Pinocchio, and he was very excited that she would come through his window and leave money for his teeth. He had asked what she did with all those teeth, where she got all the money and 1,000 other things. I was a pretty creative person, and I had come up with all kinds of stories about what she did with them, where she got the money, how she came in without making a sound, and on and on and on. I was kind of glad that he had finally lost a tooth, because I was starting to run out of material and thought if he experienced it, he might lose interest in it. We put it under his pillow that night, and I assured him that it would be gone in the morning and there would be money there when he got up. Then, of course, I fell asleep waiting for my wife to get home and woke up to find her sleeping beside me and the sun beginning to peek over the horizon. I went quickly, but quietly, and thanked my lucky stars that Brandon was a sound sleeper. He hadn't woken up yet, and I took the dollar I was going to put under there out of my pocket and prepared to make the swap. To my surprise, however, the tooth was already gone. No one had left money, but the tooth had disappeared. I looked around, thinking it had slipped out, but it was just gone. I left the dollar anyway, not wanting him to be disappointed, and went back to my room to get a little more shut-eye before the alarm went off. We never made it to the alarm because Brandon came in waving the dollar and saying the tooth fairy had come. Look what the tooth fairy left me. He said it was all for me. I told him that was awesome, but internally, I raised an eyebrow. The tooth fairy, had always been a woman. Any other time he'd talked about her, maybe, I thought, Brandon had just had a dream or something last night. He put the money in his piggy bank, and I figured we could maybe put this behind us. 2 days later, as I put him to bed, I put my hand beneath his pillow and felt something strange. I took my hand out and found another tooth. "What's this?" I asked him. "Oh, I lost another tooth," Brandon said. There was no excitement or hope that the tooth fairy would come. Just a matter-of-fact tone. I guess that was what I wanted. His obsession with the tooth fairy had ended when he had finally lost a tooth. He'd gone from being absolutely excited to absolutely unfazed, and that stopped me for a moment. "Why didn't you tell me you had another loose tooth, buddy?" Don't know. It just kind of happened." I put the tooth back under his pillow, telling him to make sure to say something next time, and then I kissed him good night and put him to bed. When I went to put money under his pillow a little later, though, the tooth wasn't there. Instead, there was a coin. I took a look at it, thinking it was a $50, but realizing I was wrong almost at once. At first, I thought it was one of those weird chocolate coins you sometimes get for Christmas. Turning it, I realized it was just extremely grubby. It was heavy, like it was made out of brass or copper, and the surface looked dirty, like it had been at the bottom of a well for quite some time. I started to take it with me. Something in me wanted to keep it away from my son, but I put it back instead. It wasn't mine, after all, and by the look of it, it was probably something that he treasured. It had been back under his pillow for less than a few seconds before his hand went searching for it. His fingers took hold of it almost greedily as he clutched it, and I decided to take the dollar back with me. Brandon changed a bit after that night, but it's only in retrospect that I see it. He became very secretive. Not my little buddy like he used to be. Brandon didn't want to play video games in the living room with me anymore. He didn't want to read stories at bedtime anymore. He spent a lot of time in his room, and he just seemed to be closing off. His mother laughed at me when I told her I was feeling a little hurt by it. "He's just being a kid," she said. "Kids go through phases sometimes. Don't take it so personally. In a couple of months, he'll probably be back to his usual self again." I hoped he would, but it was hard to ignore the physical changes that were going on as well. Not only was Brandon quieter, but it seemed like he had grown. He hadn't gained a foot in a single week, but sometimes it seemed his fingers were abnormally long, his arms were strangely jointed, and his face was oddly stretched. He would look at me sometimes, like he was thinking about doing something that he knew would make me angry. I didn't like it, but he never did it right out in the open. Like I said, Brandon never came to sit with me or play video games, but I would sometimes catch him peeking at me from the hallway or from under the table in the kitchen. It was creepy, but I figured it was just little kid behavior. A month after Brandon lost his first tooth, I found another one in his backpack. Well, not just one. I found 5 hidden in the front pocket of his backpack after he left it on the kitchen table when he went to the bathroom. He had become pretty protective of the backpack, putting it in his room or keeping it close to him at all times, and I started getting suspicious of what might be in there. I didn't think it was drugs or anything. He was 6, but I thought it might be something weird or dangerous. What if he had a snake or something in there? So when he suddenly ran off to go to the bathroom, I knew this was my chance to have a look. I needed to sign his folder for school anyway, so I took out the folder and looked over the day's report before taking a peek in the pockets. The teeth were just sitting there, bumping together when I poked at them, but they didn't really look like human teeth. These looked more like animal teeth, and they were too strange to have come out of my son's mouth. They might have been from a cat or a dog, I suppose, maybe. What are you doing? I zipped the backpack and turned around, looking like I'd been caught doing something I shouldn't have done. Nothing, just signing your folder. Brandon looked at me with a great deal of distrust, taking the backpack and going to his room without putting his back to me. I told his mother about the teeth when she came home from work, but she brushed them off again, saying that little kids often collected strange things. My brothers collected animal skeletons they found out in the woods, she said dismissively, and she got ready for bed. Thank goodness it's just teeth and not a whole skull. I let it go, but it was hard not to see what was going on. Brandon started looking like he wasn't sleeping well. He had huge bags under his eyes, and he was fidgety any time he was made to sit still, like at dinner or for homework. He would get short and agitated, muttering to himself in a way I couldn't understand. I listened carefully once when we were doing math homework, and it sounded like he was talking in a different language. He looked up when he saw me noticing, squinting at me with that look of distrust, and it broke my heart to see him like that. Brandon had always been my little buddy, and this sudden change in him was painful to watch. 2 weeks later, I got a call from the school. They needed to speak to me about something important. Brandon had been in a fight where he had knocked more than a few of the kids' teeth out. I came down right away, afraid that Brandon was hurt, but when I saw him sitting in the principal's office, he looked none the worse for wear. He had a bruise on his cheek, and his hands looked like he beat them against the wall, but he didn't seem injured or in distress at all. On the contrary, Brandon looked happier than I had ever seen him. I took a seat next to him in the office, waiting to see what they had thought was so important. We called you in not because Brandon has been fighting, but because of other rumors going around about him in class. Rumors? I asked. Yes, sir. The student he fought with said Brandon has been making strange deals with other students. I shook my head, not quite understanding. What kind of deals? They say he has been buying people's teeth. I shuddered, thinking about the teeth in the bag that I saw not long ago. I looked down at Brandon, questioning him with my eyes as to whether or not this was true. He looked back at me without hesitation, pretty much letting me know that it was. He's been trading his lunch for them. He's been trading other things for them, too, like toys and other small things. He has allegedly traded over 20 students for their teeth across 3 grades. Today, the student in question took the trade, but refused to give him any teeth. Your son responded by beating the teeth out of his mouth. I looked back at Brandon, asking what he was thinking. He didn't bother to answer. He just clenched his fist in his lap and looked at the floor. I think that was when it really hit me how much he had changed. The bags under his eyes were dark and deep, and his fingers were long enough that I couldn't see how anyone didn't notice. Each finger seemed twice as long as it should be, and as he clenched, I could see a fourth knuckle on each of them. The reason we called you in, sir, is to get those teeth back. I turned and looked at the principal. What do you mean? He looked a little green as he wiped his forehead with a napkin. We believe your son has the missing teeth, but he won't tell us where they are, and he won't give them back to us. We can't seem to find them, and the mother is hopeful that the dentist can put them back in if they're not too badly damaged. If nothing else, they want them back so they can take them to the dentist and make sure the teeth are baby teeth and not permanent. Brandon hasn't said a word about where he put them, and we are deeply troubled by this behavior. I looked at Brandon and asked him where the teeth were. He shook his head, not saying a word. I asked him again, and when he shook his head this time, I heard something. Something nearly indistinguishable but altogether unsettling. Something was rattling in his mouth. We can sit here until you decide to give us those teeth, but you're not leaving until we get them back. I don't know what's gotten into you, but the idea that we wouldn't be leaving seemed to have decided him. He bent slowly over the principal desk, making eye contact with the older man the whole time as he opened his mouth. 3 teeth fell out as he pushed his tongue out, and none of them appeared to be his. The teeth clattered onto the desk like old dice, and more than one of them had the root hanging from them. As he sat back up, I had this sneaking suspicion that he was holding out. The principal, however, seemed more than okay with what he had gotten back. He told us to go, saying that Brandon was suspended for 2 weeks, and I picked up my son as we headed for the door. The principal managed not to vomit before we got out of his office, but it was a near thing. We talked the entire way home. Well, I talked, and Brandon just sat there and said nothing. I told him I didn't know what all this was about, but that he needed to stop. This wasn't him. This wasn't like him, and he needed to tell me what was going on so that I could help. I was his dad. I wanted to help him, but I couldn't help him if he didn't talk to me. The whole time, he just sat there and stared at me. Most kids who are being chastised look out the window or look at their feet, but he stared directly at me in brazen defiance. His fingers kept flexing, and I saw him put a hand in his pocket more than once. I wanted to tell him to turn them out and give me the tooth from that kid that he had kept, but something in me didn't dare. I was loath to admit it, but I was a little bit afraid of my son at that moment. He looked nothing like the boy that I had known for almost 7 years. My grandma used to tell stories about babies taken by fairies and the changelings that they left behind. This reminded me of those stories. The kid in front of me was so fundamentally different from the one I knew that it was almost like I was talking to a different person. As we pulled up into the yard, I told him he was grounded.
No tablet, no TV, no deserto.
Brandon didn't seem to care. He just walked inside and went to his room. His tablet was still on the charger, and his TV remote had been left on the door to his room. I didn't know what he was doing in there, but it clearly wasn't playing. He was way too quiet, and when his mother called to tell me she was working a double, I almost cried. I didn't want to be here alone with him more than I had to be, and that made me feel even worse. He didn't come out for dinner, and when I went to bring him his plate a little while later, I heard muffled voices as he spoke to someone. I tried to get the teeth, but they caught me. I didn't know who he was talking to. I kind of thought he might be talking to himself, but when a gruff voice responded, I felt my stomach drop. "You'll just have to do better next time." The voice was unlike anything I had ever heard. It was deep and watery, like something from the bottom of a well, and it spoke in a way that made its mouth sound strangely full. It was devoid of any kind of kindness or charity, the sounds you sometimes hear when people speak to children. It was an authoritarian invoice from the teacher, and they were not pleased with my son. "I'm grounded. They suspended me from school. I'm not going to be able to get you any teeth for at least 2 weeks. Your father has teeth," it said matter-of-factly. "Your mother has teeth too." When he answered, he didn't sound afraid. When he answered, it was with cold assuredness. "They won't just give them to me. They don't understand what I'm doing." What was he doing? That's what I wanted to know. I gripped the doorknob, hoping they wouldn't hear me, and that was when the voice said something that made my blood run cold. "Then do not ask for them. Take them, like you did from the boy today." I opened the door in one fluid motion, and my son looked up, guilty, as I walked into his room. "Who are you talking to?" I asked. "No one," he said, much too quickly. "I heard someone," I said. "I heard someone in here talking to you, and I wanted to know who it was and where they went." That was a lie. I didn't think I wanted to know who they were. What I wanted was for them to never come back again. The person had sounded like some kind of demonic fairy from a kid's story, and I was afraid of what I would see if he did come back. "It's nothing," Brandon said much too quickly again. I was doing voices. I talked to him for a little while longer, but I got nothing. He wouldn't talk to me. He wouldn't tell me anything, and eventually I just left. I should have left it at that. I should have just left it alone, but I had to try one more time. It was late, about 10:30, which was pretty late for us, and I decided to try a peace offering. I felt pretty certain he was still awake. I had heard something moving around in there, and so I cut some of the pie I had made to go with dinner and walked to his room. I was going to offer him the pie and see if maybe we could talk. I just wanted to know what it was that had made him change so much. Most of all, I just wanted my son back. It killed me to have him act like this, but as the door came open, I got more answers than I had bargained for. It was standing over his bed with its arm going under his pillow, and in the darkness of his room, I realized it had to be who he'd been talking to. The pie fell to the ground, but I had a death grip on the plate, and I realized I had sprained my thumb once I was in any state to feel it. I didn't speak. I could barely breathe, and as the thing turned to look at me, I realized my fairy tale theory might not be too far off. It was grubby looking, like something that's been living in a ditch. Its features were completely covered in something dark that had the texture of earth, except for the two large lamp-like eyes that protrude from its face like bubble lights. It was tall, something I realized as it took on its full height. It had been crouching before, putting something under my son's pillow, and it had to stoop so as not to bang its head on the ceiling, which is about 9 feet from the floor. From its back, four insect-like wings protruded. They weren't large enough to carry it, but they were large enough to be noticeable. Its hands and arms, the fingers multi-jointed, were far from delicate-looking as it wiggled them ceaselessly. I expected it to charge me. I expected it to attack me, but instead, it raised one huge finger to its face and made a shush sound. "Shhhh, you'll wake the baby," it whispered, and its mouth sounded like it was trying to swallow something. Then it smiled, and I saw not a double but a triple row of teeth inside its mouth. There's no order to them. Molars next to canines, next to bicuspids, next to what appear to be fangs and shark teeth. Its mouth is such a mishmash of teeth that it's impossible not to feel a little woozy when you look at it. It pulled its lips down, somehow containing all those teeth, and before my very eyes, it vanished. My son was pretty upset when I grabbed him up and carried him out of the house. I put him in the car, and we waited till his mother got off work before taking him to a nearby motel. I told her what I had seen, as best as I could, and I think she believes there might be something going on now. My son is furious, saying he needs to get back home so that he can do his job, but he won't say what that is. Honestly, I think he's been collecting teeth for whatever that thing was. When I went back to get us some clothes and check the house, I looked under his pillow and found another of those strange coins. There's a box under his bed, and inside it's equal parts teeth and coins. There are around 20 of them, and they're sitting next to teeth of every shape and every size. Most of them are animal teeth, but some of them are definitely human teeth. I've taken the entire box with me, but the phone call I got from my wife before I left the house was what really worried me. She called to tell me that our son had locked himself in the bathroom and she was afraid he was hurting himself. There's a weird squelching sound, followed by him yelling and crying. He had locked himself in the bathroom, but I went and got the manager to unlock it for us. What we found there will stay with me for a very long time. We're at the hospital now. My wife is in the R room with him, while I sit in the waiting room and wait for updates. The protocol states only one parent can go in at a time, and my son doesn't want me to go in there. He can't speak very well, but he made that very clear to my wife. I gave him space, not wanting to exacerbate his condition any more than I had to. I've got the box on my lap as I sit out here, and I'm not really sure what to do with it. Inside are the 8 teeth he managed to pull out of his own head before we got him restrained. Whatever this creature is, it must get its due, and my son was apparently intent on giving it that due. We'll probably end up having to take him to a mental facility, but I know he isn't crazy. I saw that thing, too, and I know it will find him no matter where we take him. So be very careful when you tell your kids about the tooth fairy. What comes to collect their teeth might be something far worse than even you could imagine.
If you like our story, subscribe English Practice Stories channel and click the bell icon.